Okay, we're back. So we'll start the Q&A session right away, and investors will basically join later, and then they can catch up from there. As I've said, if you have any questions, please write these in chat, and we'll be happy to address these. So starting very quickly, sort of introducing you and what the company is doing. Could you basically describe very briefly RCG, what you are doing, and what the company is about?
Mm-hmm. So RCG Lighthouse is the most efficient lighting as a service company. What it does, it replaces existing lighting to super efficient LED lighting at absolutely zero cost for the customer. And the only trick is that we are sharing the cash flow that we cut down from electricity invoice. So if I give you an example, from every 1,000 euros that we cut from electricity invoice, we are able to share up to 50% with the customer. So basically, at the end of the day, customer gets instant cash flow savings. He gets new lighting, and since we install additional metering system for lighting specifically, so he gets software where he can follow what's happening with the lighting.
Okay. So before we proceed, someone mentioned that the audio isn't audible. Could someone verify that very quickly? Okay, that is fine. Okay, no problem. So talking about the idea, it sounds very interesting, and also the fact that big companies so I saw in the campaign overview, you have big names such as Toyota, I believe you have Jysk involved, so these are big well-known companies. And it's really interesting idea how basically you can offer your solution, it's immediately offering these savings, but it doesn't cost the company anything to get installed. So how does that work? But more importantly, how did this idea start, and so how did the company form to produce this?
So I myself, I used to work for ST Energia. So ST Energia is the largest electricity producer in the Baltic states. And I was working in Latvia selling electricity to big companies. Soon I realized that if I really want to help companies, I should be switching sides and helping to procure electricity at most favorable rates. So initially we started by helping to actually save on the price side. And we did it on shared savings principle. And then after meeting my co-founder Wright, who was focusing on LED technology, we decided that, okay, let's move deeper into consumption side and see what can be done there. So we applied the same principle of shared savings to LED technology. Because LEDs currently, they range from, let's say, cheap and not efficient LEDs to super efficient LEDs, which can really make an impact for the customer.
Okay. So I've seen also from your video and some of the materials that you have many different, I guess you could say light bulbs, right? But many different ones. How have you tested these? How have you selected the ones which are applicable most to different, let's say, situations or environments?
So actually, if we look at lighting, no matter which country it is, then it mostly consists of three lighting components. So there are tube lamps, there are high bay lamps, basically three types of lamps. And those constitute 80% of the market. So no matter where we look, be it Estonia, Sweden, Germany, or Spain, the lamps are all the same everywhere. So actually, once you standardize and make the supply chain right, where we have invested quite a lot of time, you can actually make it quite scalable. So in fact, what we did in last 2 years, we tried to do as many different objects as possible, ranging from smaller shops to bigger shops, from smaller warehouses and so on, even ice hockey hall, which is quite
interesting.
Quite a sport in Nordics, and that way we made sure that no matter what the building is, we can actually offer standardized project and promise a certain share of savings with basically three main parameters.
And these, so the light bulbs that you provide, you also integrate your own electronics, and previously you showed me basically this chip. So could you explain, because myself, well, I don't understand much, but it would be interesting to understand what else you're bringing just besides making it energy efficient.
Yeah, so actually even if the only thing you would get from this video is just a bit more knowledge about LEDs, then one thing you need to make sure that you understand that there's a lot of electronics involved.
Okay.
And that's actually quite important, because if we look from customer's perspective, he has three options. He can do nothing, and this is actually quite popular choice. He can do it themselves, and then it kind of takes some knowledge to understand what's inside this thing. And third thing, of course, is lighting as a service, which allows to cut even higher share and without any investment. And so yeah, that's the thing which does the work, which allows LED technology to be much better than any other current lighting technology.
And how do you monitor the savings? Is this just based on, let's say, it's like a statistical approach, calculating how much the traditional light bulbs waste electricity and new ones, or is it more that you get the direct information from the bulbs themselves?
We do real-time data.
Okay.
Everything is super transparent. We install separate metering for lighting before and after. So we do a short audit before we do the installation.
Okay.
From there we gather what's the actual cost that customer has, let's say €1,000 a month. Then we do the internal, let's say, thinking, the algorithms, and then what comes out is we select what is the most efficient product in particular case, be it shop or a warehouse or anything else. And that way we are able to, let's say, from €1,000 on lighting, we cut it down to 300. That would be, let's say, the average. We cut it down 3 times. And then that remaining part is the one that we are sharing with the customer at let's say, generous percentages. So that he really gets instant benefits.
Okay. We have some new, let's say, some new investors join in. For the people who just joined in right now, please feel free to ask your questions. We also have this session being recorded so that we can we can share this later for you to catch up. But jumping back to the team. So I've mentioned how you met Rights, and now you have a team that is much bigger just based on the image you've provided. So how did the team join in, and what are the range of expertise that you're bringing to this industry?
So mostly currently we are hiring salespeople to spread the message, because we have created the infrastructure, the supply chain, basically everything is there. So now it needs to be scaled up. So mostly right now, the new team members that we are hiring, those are for sales. And currently we are 11. So the picture is actually outdated.
Okay.
And important thing to stress is that we just got our last year financial results. So the annual turnover increased 4 times and was nearly $500,000.
Okay.
So this is important thing to highlight, that currently we are growing organically from the revenues. And the reason actually why we turned to Funderbeam is to accelerate the growth, so that we can enter new markets and facilitate this transition to super efficient LED technology. Because the real problem here is that it's actually happening very slowly. And the problem...
In terms of the company, or the, let's say, providing the service overall across Europe?
No, I mean the overall lighting market, it's actually huge.
Okay.
If you would look only at Estonia, for instance, which is the smallest country in Europe, probably, top 5, definitely. Then even in Estonia, the electricity market is roughly 700 million euros. And from that, lighting is 15%. So that's a big share. And so what I meant by slow growth is that actually companies are turning to LEDs very slowly.
Okay.
And lighting as a service is something that can really facilitate the process.
Okay.
Because we ourselves are growing quite fast.
In terms of these companies, are they open to the ideas of making, so what is the challenges really for them? Is it finding or doing the research to do this themselves, maybe that stops them? Or is it rather that it is sort of, if it's not broken, don't fix this kind of mentality? What is your basically findings, let's say, from these companies?
Typical excuse is that they lack funds. For instance, we have talked to Renault. Renault has 1 year payback policy for anything related to energy. So basically they don't invest at all. Because energy efficiency is often not the core business, even for the big companies. We met, for instance, Airbus, and Airbus is saying that they are not energy intensive, although their electricity invoice is over 100 million euros. So it takes a lot of time for those big companies because the budgeting procedures, we often hear that their lease agreement for premises is going to end in 2 years. So if they invest themselves, the time horizon is let's say too long. While in our case, lighting as a service can actually be super flexible because since we have this portfolio approach, let's say if the company only stays for 2 years, we still can put LED lighting in, generate some savings, share them with the customer, and then when he moves on, we can actually take those lamps and put to other customer. Because those are the lamps are very standardized. We have done it in a way that it can be easily moved, and that's quite important as we look in future development of the company. So
going to the business model that you have. So the way it works so far, as far as I've understood, is that you basically cut the cost because of the new lighting system and then charge a percentage of what the previous expenses were, right? And this is how you make your revenue. Could you talk a bit more about this, and also how, let's say, how much time it takes you to install the system and how sort of this works out over a time span?
Yeah. So the only trick here for the customer is that we have to sign a contract for a certain period of time. So we currently offer either 3-year contracts or 5-year contracts. The longer the contract, the more we can share savings. And our ultimate goal is to reach a situation where we can go 50% split to most customers, so that it's super easy to explain. From every 100 or 1,000 euros, 50 euros you get instantly, plus the new lighting, plus the online monitoring system. And this is how it works, and it has worked pretty well. As we discussed, we have managed to sign some well-known brands. We started from Latvia. Right now we work in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and we are in open negotiations with the same companies in other European countries.
Let me check. Someone has the...
discuss French projects, both in office and industrial, so just to let you know about that.
Excuse me, could you repeat the question once more? Or include this in the chat?
No, not very. They're interested in our pipeline. So I'd asked about their pipeline.
1 second, let me check where the audio is coming from. We seem to have someone asking a question, but we can't. Could you instead write the question in the chat, please? And we'll take it from there. Okay. Let's jump straight back. So just as a reminder, if anyone wants to ask a question, please write this in the chat so that we can address it in the session. So going into, let's say, so having founded this company, right? And what is your prior experience? Is this the first time sort of starting a company? And how has that been for you and the rest of the team to build it to the current stage where currently, as I understand, you're already cash flow positive? Right, and you've superseded what your last year's objectives were in terms of revenue generation, and have also secured some contracts for the next 4 to 5 years. So how has that experience been, and what was your prior experience with startups?
So before creating RCG Lighthouse, I used to run my small consultancy firm, helping end customers, and the same thing for co-founder Rights. He used to have his own company just selling LEDs, and then when we combined those knowledges together about electricity market and technology, then we were able to have a good start. We managed to raise $500,000 quite early in the process, which allowed to build the basic structure that needs to be in place. We did a lot of smaller projects just to understand how this as a service model works. And right now, really, we are at the stage when this can be applied to many countries in Europe.
And overall, one of the biggest, let's say, I guess, if I understand, the focuses has been on these larger businesses, or rather SMEs, so to speak, around Europe. But your focus will also be shifting more towards the retail and smaller kind of either shops or small businesses, or maybe even by, let's say, home consumers, right? Or is that in one of your, let's say, objectives, or how does this fit into what you're aiming for?
If we talk about concrete numbers, then let's say average shop, which would be 500 square meters, the lighting value would actually be roughly 20,000 euros.
Okay.
So, which is big enough for us actually to work. And we probably wouldn't go, let's say, to households, but our intention is to let's say be able to serve even smaller projects. But sure, the more buildings per one, let's say, company there is, the bigger the project.
Okay.
But let's say since lighting is all the same in any building, and then we are willing to reach a situation where we can actually make it work in standardized way in basically every buildings that are using lighting.
Okay.
It really has the potential.
Let's see over here. So jumping into the funds that you're raising. So obviously we're talking about the campaign. So you've mentioned that you want to scale up operations, but could you give a bit more detail about, let's say, the target that you are looking for and how this will be applied to help you reach your goals?
Yeah. So to reach our goals, our intention is to open 3 new markets every 1 to 2 years. So actually our intention with this round is to open at least 3 markets. We are right now in negotiations in Sweden, so definitely Sweden is something where we would like to have active presence. We are also right now dealing with several projects in Poland, and definitely Germany is something where we would really like to start operations. So depending on the end result, we will decide how we approach those markets. So when we talk more specifically, of course, it's hiring team. And what we see from current experience is that it takes 3 to 6 months to set up operations and get cash flow, which is able to serve the first employees.
Okay.
So that's the main goal. If we look further, then we have the software that we are currently using, but we see how we can develop so that it can provide more tangible value to end consumers as we look in the future. We can add multiple layers of different sensors that would provide more visibility than lighting. Let's say temperature, let's say people tracking. So you can do a lot of things if you look.
Tracking is in like employees within the factory?
It could be employees at the factory. It could be people visiting shops.
Okay.
So if you look at the ceiling, so there are a lot of things, and lamps are perfectly fit to monitor what's happening actually in the building.
That's interesting.
So yeah, there are multiple ideas that we are working on and that we expect to launch in the near future.
I guess there's also this concept of IoT that comes in, right? When it comes to these devices, which not only have sensors, but they're communicating with each other and yourself. So talking about, so how does actually the topic of IoT fit in with what you're doing? Is it sort of, does it fall under that industry, or is it more kind of specifically for itself in this LaaS kind of sector?
Mm-hmm. Of course, IoT is a hot topic everywhere, but in lighting it actually makes sense, because really lighting is a fundamental part of every building, and where there is building, there is people movement, and the easiest way to track is from the ceiling. So this is really where we are heading towards, so that everything is connected in real time. Actually, already now we see what's happening with lamps in real time, and what's important on top of that is that we can really figure out what is the maximum lifetime value that you can squeeze out of LED lamp.
Okay.
And nobody knows the answer to this currently.
Is it because it isn't, let's say, like it varies a lot between products, or is it more that your system can make that more efficient in a way?
We can make it more efficient by communicating directly with our lamps. That's one thing. Of course, we invest a lot of time in supply chain. We do a lot of lab tests to make sure that we understand very well what's in the lamp. And then basically from this monitoring, we can see how our let's say preparation work, the lab tests and everything, how that applies in real life situation. Let's say currently from projects that have been working for more than 2 years, we have some projects for more than 3 years. It's perfectly fine. But if we look beyond that 5-year period that we are signing with the customers, then actually that's something where we can add additional value if we know precisely what happens in year 6, year 7, year 8, and so on. Because LED technology has a capability to run for 60,000 hours. So if average shop is running for 5,000 hours a year, so that's more than 10 years.
Okay.
And it's kind of...
And realistically speaking, because obviously as technology advances, do you expect the LED technology to also change drastically, or is it more at a point where it's very efficient and the current, let's say, light bulbs can last this entire period, the 10 years that we're talking about?
The thing is, what is happening right now is actually that LED technology has not progressed in the last year or so. The efficiency that we got 1.5 years ago is actually still leading efficiency in Europe, according to our knowledge. And what's happening actually that a lot of things from LED technology are being taken off just to make the price lower. And then that's a huge problem, because in that way LED technology won't reach its potential. Because let's say our LEDs currently are twice as efficient as the average in the market. So it's actually not only about just converting to LEDs, it's about what kind of LEDs do you choose. So yeah, there are a lot of details in the technology as such. But currently, there's no doubt that LEDs is the technology that everybody is going to use. So the timing is really now. The decisions are being made now, and lighting as a service should be on the table for every company deciding to go for LEDs.
One of the common questions that gets asked during these sessions is, looking back at how you have started, so starting from Latvia and so on, if you had to start again, from whether it is from a different region or a different approach, what would you have done differently, or rather, maybe which is the best market that you think your service is most applicable to, as in starting from?
I would say that if that is a shop or a warehouse, it looks the same everywhere in Europe. And we started from the tiny Baltic countries, but that was a good thing because we were able to test different concepts, and we were forced to actually think outside the tiny Baltic states so that it could work in bigger markets like in Sweden, like in Germany, and so on. And currently we are really at the stage where this can be applied to many markets outside the Baltic states, and it's all the same. And the strategy was that we work with well-known brands so that we get positive reference here, and it makes it easier to enter those bigger markets.
Okay. Talking beyond, let's say, we mentioned that the funds will be used to expand in other areas across Europe, but what about outside of Europe? Is this something that is a consideration, maybe a long-term option or direction? What are your thoughts about this?
Our belief is that it's all about focus, right, in startups, so definitely we don't look beyond Europe. We look step by step, not to burn any money in the process. Which we have done up until this point. So there's no way we plan to, let's say, overspend in opening some big number of markets and then just trying to figure out how to manage it. We definitely want to go step by step, and why Europe is interesting, because one thing, Europe has the highest electricity price in the world, so that's quite favorable for energy efficiency. And of course, energy efficiency in general is something that Europe is willing to go. If you look at 2020 goals or 2030 goals, then sure, policy will help. But if we look from lighting as a service standpoint, then it makes perfect sense already now. So no need to let's say have some support from politicians or whoever. It's just really clear offer on the table, so take it or leave it.
Seeing, let's say, talking about competitors, what are the main, you mentioned this briefly in the campaign overview. So lighting as a service, I guess it is a bit niche in a sense, although it has a big application. But what are the major competitors that you have right now, and how do you differentiate yourselves from these competitors?
Of course, the major competitors are the large suppliers like Philips, like Osram, like Zumtobel, and other lighting suppliers. Our main advantage, of course, is that we are supplier independent. It means that we are not biased towards one or other brand. And actually, if we look at the big brands, then they actually failed this LED trend, and now they are trying to recover. And of course, they have the supply chain and the brand recognition and everything else, but we are actually capable to reach those customers directly, to put the offer on the table and discuss it one-on-one and make it so standardized that actually those big brands cannot do, because they are kind of moving much slower.
Okay. And these brands, I mean, talking about, let's say, Philips or Osram, I mean, they produce the light bulbs, but they don't essentially, up to my knowledge, provide a solution to make the most out of these and really regulate these as you do. Correct? Or is this something that you're also sort of trying to take from their space?
Well, if we look at Philips specifically, according to our knowledge, they did Los Angeles as a city. It was a huge project, of course. But that's, again, another difference. We are able to serve smaller type of customers that the big brands would never do. And if we look at technology as such, then actually it's lighting, right? You don't care what's written on it. So that's actually the message that we are trying to send, that you should better do lab tests and understand what technology is all about, or you rely on lighting as a service. It doesn't matter what the brand name is. So that's actually super important, because in technology space it's evolving so fast, so that either you have LED person on your staff or you outsource it and do lighting as a service. But no need to have some kind of phone number from Philips. It wouldn't help. Because if you would be doing lab tests for Philips LED lamps, they wouldn't even qualify for top 3 or top 5.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So let's see if we have, just very quickly, if we have any questions. Just remind me, if you want to ask anything, just leave it in the chat and we'll head over there. But next up, I'd like to talk about the investments, like what's in it for investors in a sense. So you obviously want to grow, and this is something where investors can come in to support your company, help you grow, and make their investor grow with your company. But what are the obstacles that you're trying to solve right now, and what are the risks that you foresee for your company and for the investment?
So when it comes to investments, then of course, as discussed before, we want to enter new markets, and that's very important. Another thing is that we need to finance the contracts that we are signing as we speak. So we do have a portfolio of contracts that need to be fulfilled.
Okay.
So that's another part. And of course, when it comes to onboarding new investors, then sure, we are open-minded. We want to listen to what their ideas are. We do have our own targets that we plan to reach, but actually from starting campaign, we have had good feedback and questions from different markets asking whether we could start operations there. And sure, if there are good opportunities where Funderbeam network could lead us, we are sure to listen and to make them work and to generate solid returns.
It's excellent. So yes, obviously we encourage anyone who's looking to just check out the information, check out what the company is doing. It's certainly very interesting, and we'd like to see how it grows following this investment. So let's hope for that. And in the meantime, let's just wait for questions from our audience. As I've mentioned previously, we will include this in the campaign overview. So if you have missed any part of it, then you will find the information there, and feel free to ask any questions either through the discussion section on the page or write to us directly, and we will redirect those questions directly to you. Excellent. So let's wait just very briefly and see if we have any questions. In the meantime, is there anything else that you'd like to add about maybe what's going on right now with the company, right, besides the fundraising campaign?
Of course, we continue our operations. The daily routine is that we are picking up phones and contacting new customers. We are doing lighting audit, and of course the end result is that we are signing contracts. So once the contracts are signed, they need to be fulfilled, and for that, of course, also money is needed. And what I didn't mention is that we did start with some equity investment, but then we also managed to attract the leading commercial bank in the Baltic states. So that helped us to, let's say, increase our borrowing capacity so that we can serve even bigger projects in multiple countries.
In terms of projects, how long does it typically take? Is there obviously, I assume it depends on how big the project is or what kind of factory or business you're working at, but how long does it usually take to do these kind of installations to get to a point where it's from contact to getting it ready and starting to use the new system?
Our aim is to squeeze it to 1 month. Our best case has been where we have signed contract from first meeting in 2 weeks. And then when it comes to implementation, we can do 500 square meter shop in 1 night.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so we really strive to be as efficient as possible. And what's actually interesting, since we are coming from the Baltic states and we are considering several projects in Sweden, and actually it pays off to ship people and all equipment from Riga, where our head office is, to Stockholm, and drive people in a minivan and install lamps along the way where we have agreed. So that's the interesting part, that actually we would need, let's say, if we look further in the future, then we would probably only need, let's say, 5 spots in Europe from where actually the whole region can be served. So people going with the mobile service team that can replace lamps. And what's interesting, they mostly actually work during the night.
Mm-hmm. So it's not during work hours, doesn't have to interrupt basically the work of the company. Right.
Well, of course, we do as customers say. Let's say there might be cases where customer doesn't work during night, so he doesn't want to, let's say, leave some kind of security guy or something. Then we would be working during the day. But let's say we have done it in a way that it's perfectly fine if we need to work during night.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. So what else? If we talk about, let's say, some market estimates, then actually it's interesting that there has been some studies on lighting as a service, and we were included as a top 15 company in the world, alongside with Philips, Osram, and other big names. And from that study, it was forecasted that the market is going to grow at 40% rate up until 2025. And then since we are currently growing 300%, then let's say we see that it only takes to follow the market, and it's going to be quite okay. So that's an interesting study that we actually accidentally found when googling lighting as a service, and
discovering not that you had been included in this list, or that how basically
that we were included, because obviously if you are coming from a small market, then you kind of assume that nobody cares what's happening there. But actually that was our intention, that let's do it step by step in smaller country, but make it right, so that once we are big enough to enter bigger markets, we don't do any failures. So that was intentional, also trying to work with different type of objects. Let's say ice hockey hall wouldn't make much sense if you want to go to, let's say, South Europe. They are not good at hockey. But still it was a good experience, because it's different type of environment, and let's say, the puck is very small, so you have to light it in a super, let's say, leveled way, and we did so.
In terms of projects that you've worked on, and I guess I'll close with this and then see if we have any questions, but what has been the most perhaps challenging and the most interesting project in your opinion to work on?
The most challenging probably is that we tend to listen to what customer needs are very closely. But as we have done over 130 projects now, then we do observe that although the needs are different, the end result is actually still the same. And that's really where the challenge is, to somehow find this right compromise between what customers' expectations are and what they actually need. So that's always sort of this interesting type of conversation, where you should try to convince customer that we have done it in 10 shops, so your shop is no different than the other. And then of course, so what are other challenges? Let's say if we would be working on like super big deal, then of course financing would be a challenge, if especially if that's spread across let's say 10 countries, because if we would be using commercial bank, that wouldn't work, because there are not that many banks who operate in many different markets. But since we have let's say good expertise from smaller projects that are spread across let's say 3 countries, then we would be able to work it out. So those are few challenges
Okay.
that we are
In
facing.
terms of the exciting projects, perhaps?
Well,
Is there a differentiation, really? Or is it,
we do care about customer needs, and our ultimate goal is to really facilitate this transition to
Okay.
full LED world, and we do pay attention to details, but at the end of the day, that's the ultimate goal, and so we typically count square meters. So
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
uh,
It's been a pleasure, but thank you obviously for joining us today.
thank you.
Again, let me see if there's, yeah, so we can wrap up over here. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll have this video recording on the website, but in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to write directly on the Funderbeam platform. Check out the campaign overview, and you can also ask the questions from the discussion tab directly to Kaspars. So thank you very much, Kaspars.
Thank
and
you.
Until next time.
Mhm.
See you.
Bye bye.